Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, as you know, today we are going to discuss democracy and overview. You know, in last 62 years, India has been successful in not only in conceptualizing but also exercising and also living in democracy. What a democracy should be. We have shown the world this is the form of democracy which could be imitated the world over. As you know, there are diverse opinion and how diverse regions live together and respect each other. This has been followed in India, and that's why the world is following now the Indian model of democracy. So, at this juncture, we would try to know what is the basic concept of the democracy, different approaches, and what our founding father of Constitution laid the foundation of the democracy, how they have given us a strength, and how they could be more stronger if we contribute towards it. So these are some questions apart from just telling that we have been doing this and that. So these are the academic interests of the things which we come to note in today's lecture. And for discussion on all these topics, we have in the studio Dr. Satish Kumar. He is Assistant Professor of Political Science in Central University, Haryana. So I hope his knowledge and experience will help us to understand the different approaches to study the democracy, and also will give some insight and also what could be done for the making the democracy more stronger. So with this hope, we invite Dr. Satish Kumar for the lecture on this great topic. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Once again, it is a very relevant and important theme to discuss with you. Democracy, not only in India but all over the world, has been a matter of debate, a matter of dispute, which kind and which form of government could be called a democratic government, and sometimes a democratic government is really a democratic or not. So this debate is taking place in many parts of the world. Different connotations, different views have come up for us to understand what is really a democratic system. Being a student of political science and researcher, that becomes more important for all of us to see much deeper into the lines which appear in the newspaper and what we see in the TV channels. So the onus on us not only to conceptualize but to understand it in a much more effective manner and try to analyze more effectively for others to understand what does it mean by a democracy and what does it mean by a democratic system. So when we use this word democracy, what does come into your mind? What are the components which constitute our democratic system? If you read the textbook, the theory, a number of factors are explained. A number of factors have been told by our great political theorists. And one of the main component of a democratic system is control over decision-making power by larger section of the society. When an elected government is supposed to take the decision, and on that decision that reflects the will of the people. So this is a misnomer, this is a misunderstood concept, and I could say that is a half-cooked understanding about democracy that being elected, our right to vote is supposed to be a larger understanding, or I could call a misunderstanding about a democratic system. The government which is elected for 5 years and almost remain ineffective, remain completely out of touch with the masses. Can we call it a democratic government? And this is a major concern not only in India but many parts of the world. We might have heard about the major very important quotations of Rousseau. Man is born free and everywhere is in chain. That same theory applies when we talk about this elected form of a democratic system. So the political meaning or the political understanding of democracy does not limit itself with the being right to vote and right to get elected. It is much more than that. It has not only political component but social as well as economic components. Democracy is not only relevant for the state, which is of course the largest associations of the society when we understand and when we try to read in the political science. But if a society which is undemocratic, then there is much chances of apprehension that a state will also get trapped in a very undemocratic set of traps. And that is happening not only in India but many parts of the world. So two major components of democracy is a decision-making power and equality of rights. Theoretically, these are very important components to have a democratic set of system. But is it possible that merely an elected set of system will create equality of rights? And the decision which is taken by an elected government will reflect the views of the larger section of the society? And if these two components are missing out, then can we call it is not a democratic set of system? So these are the matter of debates which we need to here understand in the larger perspective when you try to explain a democratic set of system and existing democracy in India for the last 6 decades. There was an article which came in 1996 written by a very important personality, and he discussed about is the democracy is the best form of government. And in that article he tried to argue if America, if the US would not have accepted a democracy, a democratic form of government, democracy might not be so a bone of contention in all over the world. It might not have been such a honey topic where everybody is talking about democracy. It is merely because of the US has adopted an agenda to popularize according to its own framework which suits the interest of the US. Since 1950s, this perception of democracy became much popular and debatable. So this is one another questions where we raise the finger on democratic system itself, there are many other sets of governance are present in the different parts of the world, and sometimes they vouch that they create a situation we are much more democratic than other parts of the world. Like China, you take the example. If you talk to the leader of Chinese, they say we are much more democratic and it is a better form of government. If we see the history of democratic development in Pakistan, the basic concept of basic democracy was popularized by a military dictator, in which he said that this is a much purer form of the democracy. So, but being a student of political science, we need to analyze, was it really a democratic set of system? Is the system which exists in China is a democratic, where there is no freedom of expressions, where the decision is taken by a handful of the people? Where there is no political civil liberty. So if these major components which constitute the fundamental backbone of any democratic system, if these are the missing, then how could we judge it as a democratic set of government? So in this line, being a student of political science, we all need to understand how do we study democracy in Indian colleges and universities, and what are the major fundamental questions we need to understand at the backdrop of a democratic set of structure. And in future, if this system is supposed to be the best system, then why it has failed to a large extent? And if, though it has failed, how it could be streamlined, strengthened, so the further journey of democracy should be much better, smoother and faster. So these are the major concerns before us, in which we need to analyze, explore, ponder over, and a travelogue of almost a 60 years journey, in which we will see how it has moved and what were the aspirations of our makers, those who constituted these constitutions, those who had the foresight, those who had the plan to make India really a democratic country. When we talk about recently, there is a very important word which has been quite often used and sometimes misused as well: exclusive growth, exclusive democracy. Is it possible that we can have, or any part of the world will have exclusive democracy? And when we talk about the exclusive democracy, what does it mean? We might have, while reading the political science, there are three major thinkers in which we can reflect that the exclusive democracies are talked about. Although it is not talked about, we can inferences we can draw from their thought. And one was Plato's philosopher king. If we read between the lines, the way he wanted to create a set of system in which on the top of the system will be a philosopher king, and the way he will run the state will be absolutely impeccable, where there will be no fault, there will be no traps, there will be no underdevelopment, there will be no malnourishment, there will be no illiteracy, and complete out and out, it would be an exclusive form of system, whether we can call it a democratic system or whether we call it other form of system, but that will be complete holistic. But thought of Plato, as we all know, was not translated into action because more or less it was a utopian concept. Second, if we try to understand in holistic term of a democracy, the thought of Marx when he used to call about end of the dictatorship of proletariat, and from there the state will cease to exist and set of system will come into practice. There will be no rules and regulations. The consciousness among the people will be at the highest level, and that may be called, though in the terms and in analysis and the thought of Marx, if we read, is absolutely and quite different and opposite to the norms of democracy. But when we call about exclusive democracy, the thought influences could be found from theory of Marx as well. And the third, Gandhi's theory of Ram Rajya. He also talks in the same language, the language and the terms and fabrics and contours which were explained by Plato and other utopian thinkers who created a scene that the holistic development of the human being could be possible only in this set of structure. But it did not, again, get on the ground to move. So it remained an utopian. So the exclusive democracy in any part of the world is not possible, and it has never existed and may not exist in future as well. Whether the oldest democracy in USA or the largest democracy which we have in India, or the European countries which are also nurturing, reforming, debating, researching on democracy, they also could not claim that this set of system exists there. So the system which are more popular, the system which are functional in many parts of the world, whether they are, how far they are democratic, and if they are not democratic, why they are not, what are the reasons? These are the important questions, and being a student of this discipline, we need to go in deep, try to understand, analyze, understand the situations and conditions. Then we can come out with more effective tools to work on the existing problems which we face in India, whether it is a social, economic, or political. Even the decision making, when I said that democracy does not mean it is merely a political connotations, it is social as well. In the society where the decision is taken, Let me give you an example of my university itself. Uh, it is an institution. On the top of the institution, there is a post which is called Vice Chancellor. He takes the decision. Every university does not have this kind of facility, but while understanding the basic tenets of democracy, this example could be very befitting examples in which the process of decision making, not only the decision, but the process of decision making should be which should be based on the participations of the different stakeholder. So there was a culture, we can call it a culture program. The university wanted to organize it, a talk on a movie, the recent movie which was being made and quite controversial as well, Pouncing Toma. So decision was taken by the university. The idea was evolved by the Vice Chancellor, an eminent scholar of this country, Professor Mulchand Sharma. He said that let's debate on that. And before displaying this movie, a meeting was organized, and meeting was in which meeting all the faculty members were there. They aired their views, the positive and negative factors of the movie, the viability and relevance of the movie, and when it was debated, the process, the decision was taken by majority of the participants, in which the students were also a stakeholder, that no, okay, this movie is fine, and we will debate. And in the debate, not only the faculty, but the students also participated. So if a decision could have been taken by the highest authority and it would have been regulated, but he thought it better to have a democratic sentiments is more important in implementing any major area. And he said categorically that if the institution has to grow, the democratic sentiments should be the citadel of any institutions. So this is about an university. Likewise, if there is a functioning of the government in which the parliament is supposed to be the center where the debate, dispute, compromise, clashes of interest take place. And in fact, that is the responsibility of the parliament to take this responsibility. It is not only in India, but all over the world. And how the democracy function, in which the participants from the different parts of the country participate. But if we see in detail, if we go deep into the lines of the process, the way the session is being conducted, and you might have been reading in the newspaper, things are coming down very clearly that the culture of debate is declining rapidly. My problem, the problem of understanding about democracy does not limit itself there. But as we all know, the important component of democracy in any part of the world is to maintaining diversity and plurality of any society or nation state. We all know that India is a nation state. We have different languages. We have different religions. We have different ethnic groups. And the purpose of parliamentary democracy, when we adopted, when our forefathers, the constitution makers, the nation makers, try to evolve it, they had a vision that the voice of all would be included in this house. Their concern, their problems will be addressed through the proper channels, and while taking the decision, the same kind of sentiments, the same kind of a structure would be maintained. And while implementing the decision, the same process would be followed. And how this stream of democracy from top to bottom and from bottom to top will flow. From bottom to top will try to control the structure so it should not derail, and from bottom to top will try to see that any kind of gap is not being created on the way. But has it happened so? Did we maintain the same line and length? Perhaps to a certain extent, yes, but to a large extent, we have to accept this fact that we failed so many times, we faltered, and that is why the kind of problems which we face in terms of economy, in terms of social challenges, are more in numbers than we used to have immediately after the independence. And it all happened in the journey of 6 decades of a democratic journey. So these are the major challenges. These are the major concern. How to address these challenges? Being a student of political science, how to understand, how to conceptualize the kind of problem which used to exist in 1950s and 60s are much larger in scope and intensity. We had a caste system, it was a problem. It is still a problem in a different perspective. We have a gender discriminations during the independence and immediately after the independence, and still it is a major problem for us. If we analyze the gender perspective of democracy, we will find that still less than 5% and somewhere less than 2% of the representatives figure out in the assembly and parliament. Why has it happened so? Not only in India, but all over, in other parts of the world as well. Scandinavian countries, European countries, even in America. The numbers of female in parliaments are very few. The reason could be historical, reason could be political, but to large extent, that was the responsibility of a democratic system. That was the challenge of a system which includes everyone within its fold, whether it is a minority community or the community which is not equally in power. So, in the backdrop of existing these problems, and we try to analyze the two major components of democracy, the control of decision-making power by a large section of the society and equality of rights civil liberties, and see the problems, existing problem, can we say we have free election? There is no doubt about it. And merely being a free election, we say that India is a democratic country. We claim, we become very happy, we cherish, celebrate after the elections that this is the elected government. But do we realize that once the government is elected for 5 years, it will run its own course of action without giving a proper hit on which this government has come into power? It will forget the community which has not voted, or which was not in the fold of that interest of the political party. And that has created a dichotomy. The tribal people, almost 7.5% of the total population of this country, the pathetic political and economic situations verify this fact that little has been done by the state to accelerate their economic and social mobility. I will try to give 3 major examples through which we can not only try to understand the fabrics of democracy, but at the same time foresee the future course of action which this country is likely to take. Right to food, right to education, and right to justice. Let's take these examples. There is no doubt about it that Indian democracy in the last 50 years has moved from a confused utopian concept to a right-based approach. There's no doubt about it. And in fact, the forefathers, they were so obligatory in their approach. They were so vivid and candid in their style that they did not think these are the major components which are part of the constitution, which is not mandatory, which is not ruled by force, by the decision of the court. But the government itself is so conscious and sensitized that while taking the decision, while making or framing the policy, they will take into proper account. But successive government, one after another, not only disrupted or misread, but almost forgotten and deleted the ideas of our constitution maker. And with this, a movement started in 1960s, 70s, and it picked up its momentum with a wave in which the international conferences also contributed to a large extent in creating a public view. And then an approach which is not merely an obligatory, but a very concrete terms of the right. This is my right and I want to take it against the state. This has evolved and the state has to confirm them. Unless until we do this, we cannot remain seated on power. So, on the three major components which shape the lives of the ordinary people: right to justice, but still there is still a long gap. As we all know, a democracy cannot sustain, cannot remain effective unless its fundamental rights are protected. And who is there standing as a supervisor who can see the violation of the fundamental rights, and in the true sense it is not implemented with the interest of the larger section of the society? It is the Supreme Court, the High Courts, and other lower courts. But large extent, the people of India, they are very scared about the notion of justice. And that is why they are scared to approach if the rights are being violated. At the one hand, they are not aware about their rights. They do not know if this is my right. Proper information has not been fed to them. And even they come to know through someone, they are very reluctant, hesitant in approaching to the body which will address their concern and right. This has been realized long back through many important decisions of the Supreme Court to simplify, to make it a people-oriented exercise. So people, the apprehension, hesitations, reluctance will go away, and boldly, smartly, they can approach to the court. It has happened to a certain extent. It has been very useful in addressing their justice through Lok Adalat. But still people are very scared. That people do not want to approach at the time of crisis. But maybe in another 40 to 50 years journey of Indian democracy will completely be successful in developing this right-based approach in much more effective manner. In the second problem, our second thought when we talk about the right to food is another major concern. While analyzing and understanding a democracy, the agriculture minister, this complete cabinet, media, they say that we do not have the crisis of food. At least for the 10 years, enough food has been produced by this country and it has been stocked in FCI. But in spite of that, people are dying of hunger. People are starving in many parts of the world. So why is it so? When the great economist, Nobel laureate, Amartya Sen said this very categorically, that crisis of food does not mean that lack of availability of the food, but the excess of the food becomes more meaningful. And there the democracy has to play an important role. A democratic government has to play an important role. If you have enough food and your people are dying of hunger and starvations, then what kind of democratic setup we have evolved in the 60 years? And that is why there is a bill which is pending, and as part of the controversy, right to food bill in which if it is ensured, that will become a right of the people to approach the court if these basic rights are being violated. In the same manner, right to education is another important component on the same corollary of right-based approach taken place. Education was understood in holistic term as the term which in the development of a personality, if it is missing out, then the nations will not stand on its own feet and march ahead. But there are many problems on the way of right to educations. Though it has been implemented, it has been realized, but we create a kind of vicious circle where the equal opportunity is not being provided. Let's try to understand at the backdrop of right to education and our democratic set of system. We liberalize our economy. We allow MNC to start their business houses in India. To have the minimum qualifications for these companies, we need to have English speaking ability. We need to have a very convent educated background. We need to have a smart outlook. So merely giving right to education in which thing has to be done, so it was done. Education has to be given, it was given for the sake of name. There are many glaring examples in India where a kid of an illiterate father, extremely poor parents, studied for continuously 5 years from class 1 to class 6, and that kid was unable to read and write. Is it a right to education? Is it the system in which we are creating and making that our work, the responsibility which was given to us was done? So this is one major challenge. There is no doubt about it. There is no dearth of schemes which were implemented in India from 1950 to 2012. If you see the whole volumes of schemes which were drafted, executed in India, in many parts of the India, if would have been done in the right manner, the economy and the social structure of India would have been much in better conditions. But we do not know how to do it in more effectively, how to make it a successful venture. Creating a scheme itself becomes a success. But success does not flow into the ground where it was desirable, where it is needed, and in which a number of factors work against the success. Corruption is one major component. It is not only one. The accountability is completely missing out. Transparency is disturbed. And to a certain extent, as I've given you an example of democratic values and sentiments are not properly coded while implementing these major decisions. These are the problems which not occurred in the last 6 decades. But challenge, since these anomalies, these errors are still prevalent in our system, not only in our system, but many parts of the world. We become very cheering that Indian democracy has thrived, not only survived, but thrived in the last 6 decades. We are very successful in conducting a free and fair poll in Jammu and Kashmir. We were very successful in conducting a free election in the northeastern states. And whereas Pakistan has failed, Bangladesh is tottering, Nepal is still trying to come up, Sri Lanka is also under stress, and many parts of the world, European countries, are also in the drift crisis of a democratic structure. There is no doubt about it. These are the matters, if we analyze comparatively, there is a matter for a success and jubilations. But these jubilations are like the bubbles which defy, in real terms, and when we scale our own success rate of democratic journey, we also become very concerned. We become very pessimistic. Deplorable thoughts overtake. Why is it so? And how to challenge this major concern, our major concern. Being a student of political science, we all need to think about it, to ponder about it. We blame the system very easily, and we forget the responsibility as a citizen, as a watchdog of the system, and as a responsibility of academicians which we need to play. How this system could be strengthened, how the structures of Indian democracy could be made to be made more functional, in which, in the real terms, the decision which were being taken by the government reflect the views of the people. Right to equality and civil rights are protected, but the minority groups whose identity are being restored. When we talk about the tribal identity in India, Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, categorically said that neither we need to disturb the identity of the tribal people, nor we like to leave them completely cut off from the mainstream. So the policy was to adopt them, cultivate them, cajole them to bring into the mainstream, but at the same time maintaining their identity. There are many research. The smaller tribal groups, they are not only dying out, but their linguistic identity is being completely forgotten and deleted from this nation state. So when we claim a true framework of a democratic structure in which plurality and diversity is one major component, if that is the case, then we cannot claim and put our collar that we are a successful democratic country. In the same way, the many parts of your country Initially, they started the movement in a peaceful manner, but now they have become insurgent. Some of them become Naxalites, and some of them became terrorists. There is no doubt about it that when we talk about the democracy and rule of law, we we use the word liberal democratic system. When we talk about the liberal democratic system, what does it mean? It means that democracy will be more functional when it is bound by a rule of law. Government which is being elected for 5 years, it does not mean that it will work on its whims and wishes. And that is why most of the democratic countries, they have a very flexible set of constitutional system in which a democratic set of government function, and India is one of them. But how these norms which were explained very categorically in our constitutions are widely violated and created a situation in which in some within your part of the country started demanding from secessions, that they do not want to live in this country. Then can we claim that we are a very successful democratic country? Not at all. We need to adopt the system to bring them into the main fold. If they are the people for which this democratic set of system exists, and if the system itself rejects these people, how could we call them the system is completely and purely a people oriented, a people centric? So in the larger context, democracy is a very wide subject. It covers within its layer different economic, social and political problems. As a student, as a researcher, we all need to continuously think, evolve new thoughts, and not only evolve new thoughts, try to correlate and analyze the major factors of being a successful democracy and failures at the same time, how and where we have failed. And once we have failed, what are the major things which you can adopt to become again a successful a democratic country. So these are the major challenges for Indian government, Indian political system, where we can make our way much more better, effective, progressive, where we can address. And as a student of political science, we all need to continuously think about it, the emerging problems within the structure of democracy. Thank you.
So, what you suggest in coming days, we will find more participatory kind of the things in democratic, adopting the democratic values and temper.
Yes, that is true. That is the major component of democracy. If in the process of decision making, if it is not adopted, the larger section of the voice of the large section of the society, not all, which is not possible, then definitely it will not be a successful form of a democratic structure.
Because we have seen that in the beginning there was ideology-driven democracy, now development-oriented democracy, and also more emphasis on the participatory model of democracy. So this will herald in a new sort of inclusive. Some people have started to talk about the inclusive democracy. So what about that? What could be different from this in basic parameters?
Well, it was when it was obligatory, and the major parts of the structures of democracy were mentioned in the part 4 of the constitution, that is called directive principle. And the intention of the constitution makers were very genuine, and they thought it that the successive government will keenly follow and take into notice while framing the policy. But once they almost failed, then this right-based approach evolved in Indian democracy, and now it is, I think, created altogether a different set of system, and it will rectify the major mistakes within the Indian democracy.
Okay. So the three landmark, in your view, events which have shaped the democracy could be studied by the students of political science. What could be and need to be revisited by the academicians? What do you say?
The first and foremost, Indian democracy has survived itself is one of the major success, and definitely it has reached out to large section of the society, and it has rectified its own mistakes. Like, yes, the mistake was committed in Northeast, the mistake was committed in Jammu and Kashmir. Then in over the years, it has been rectified by certain decisions, and the kind of right-based approach which was started in 1990s and which is coming till today, these are the major force and changing, I think, the spirit of Indian democracy that will take it a long way of making it a very successful venture.
Okay. So, well, friends, as Dr. Satish Kumar said that we have come a long way, but still a longer way we have to go. We have solved out the problem offered in the initial days of democracy when we got independent. It was in fact the teething problems every country faced when they got independence. So we sorted it out, and we also laid some certain kind of principles, certain kind of models which have been which have helped us to reach to a goal which has been set by the leaders of our country. So I hope this has given a clear direction, concrete shape. So we have been proud of our democracy, Indian model of democracy. So this is a good, and with this word we'd like to conclude the lecture, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Satish Kumar for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.